I'd like to introduce our guest, Simona Barbieri, founder and creative director of HubDot, turning a meetup around her kitchen table into a movement that has reached over 25 countries and counting, and over 35,000 people.
I would say my music friends, my creatives, the very grungy, cool people. And then my wonderful world of Fulham, pushing prams and very sort of middle class and privilege. And then the world of the city, corporate lawyers, the CEOs. I thought, wow, wouldn't it be incredible if I could help these three almost contrasting worlds to meet? People went into this idea of the networking as a sort of, transactional.
Yeah, it was a bit cringe. It was a bit like, do
we have to network?
With your name badge on.
Can we have the vibe of a kitchen table? This is how I want to meet my investors. This is how I want to talk about my business, because it just feels like as warm as the kitchen table.
The first time I went to a HubDot event, it's like no one has ever asked me up until that point, what's your story?
Just tell me about your mindset today, your story. Don't worry about where you work and what you do. It doesn't really matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what background. Somebody can learn from your story. I think HubDot is a way, is a language, So connecting around possibilities, connecting around their own story, the story that they would have that specific day, not the title or the role that society would put on them.
Right, okay, so I'd like to introduce our guest, our very special guest, Simona Barbieri. I have to make sure I say that in the proper Italiano way.
Beautiful.
Thank you. My other half will be very proud of me. Founder and creative director of HubDot, from corporate events at Goldman Sachs to pursuing her passion as a jazz singer, and then eventually turning a meetup around her kitchen table into a movement that has reached over 25 countries and counting, and over 35,000 people. Wow. Simona.
What a great story.
I know.
Who's that?
That's you, by the way. So I know that a lot of people kind of call you the Italian mama on a mission.
And they do this.
You have to say this. Italian mama on a mission to connect us in this really profound way. So I had my first HubDot experience and I was like, wow, what is this? So for anyone who doesn't know what HubDot is, can you just explain? Although until you go there, you feel it, but just explain to me in words.
I'll explain to you. Thank you so much, by the way. What a beautiful introduction. I love it. And I love this, how you said my name. I loved everything about it. What is HubDot? I think HubDot is a way, is a language, is a way of connecting with people, is a way of thinking about oneself, our own stories. And that's how it started. The idea was to create a language where human beings could really connect with each other with the heart. So connecting around possibilities, connecting around their own story, the story that they would have that specific day, not the title or the role that society would, put on them. And so, HubDot is a social movement, really. I mean, I always think, is it really arrogant to say that that's what I started in my new empowered place as I hit my big 50th birthday last year? I think that's what started. Unprepared, unplanned. I always say I was the most, unplanned CEO and founder you would have ever found. I had no idea. I just went with this sense, this spirit, this thing that I had to connect people, and I wanted to bring this sort of the Italianness into London and create a piazza and all of that. But I hadn't really thought. You have a beautiful expression in English. Never, don't what you wish for. What do you say? Don't, be careful.
Be careful what you wish for.
This is it. Be careful what you wish for. And when I started HubDot, I had no idea that it would become this incredible, beautiful global community that obviously presented a lot of challenges. And so I just went. I just had to go. I had to do it.
It's almost like it carried you. It kind of almost like a wave.
Completely. It was a simple website with a little paragraph about strip your label, connect through your story. And then I had to go to one city and another one, and Dubai, and then Portland, and then Milan, and my three kids who were tiny at the time. Mama, I've got to go. I've got to launch HubDot. they want to connect a community and just got to take the dots and just, so yes, it's quite an extraordinary story really, but that's what it is. I think is the language of human connections. And I think it's something that is so spontaneous, because if you say to anyone, so strip the label, just tell me about your mindset today, your story. Don't worry about where you work and what you do. Everyone would say, wow, that's a really, they usually go, wow, that's interesting. And I think you make people think differently about themselves. But it sits in a...
I don't think, so I'm kind of casting back to the first time I went to a HubDot event. And it was by accident that I went. And then I was also asked to speak. I was so nervous.
In Brighton.
I just didn't understand what it was that I was coming to, and you were like, you've got to, you've got this short amount of time, and I want you to give your story. And no one had ever asked me about my story. It's like no one has ever asked me up until that point, what's your story, right? Before, it's always like, you're either doing a job interview or you're working out where you're going next, or no one goes, what's your story? And when you have to stop and think what your story is, that whole thing is quite profound in itself, because you don't stop and think about your story. And the fact that your story has some collateral, that it means something to someone else. So, and I think in the last few years, we've been seeing a little bit more of a movement in people, sharing their stories. That's happening more. But when I first went to HubDot, which was about 5 years ago, and it was started before that, there was no one asking somebody, what's your story?
I know.
And that was so special that it felt like, oh, you're not asking me about all the things that I've done or what I stand for, all the things that we believe gives us validation, right? But it was actually stripping it back to...
And that sort of stamp of quality.
Exactly.
Did you go to university? You
What
sound
did you do?
that. You're, okay, good English, good accent, bad accent. You got your CEO position, or you're down there, or you're here. And I think that all of those, I always say, there are barriers. There are walls that, that prevent people from connecting, truly connecting. Like you do when you share a story. It doesn't really matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what background. You're just really sharing authentically. And so when you do that, as you were saying, one is something that somebody can learn from your story. So whatever you've experienced, you pass on. And it's a beautiful, I always say, gift. A story is a gift.
I'm so intrigued of understanding this storyteller who's kind of, brought this kind of concept to life. Where did this come from? So, Simona in her formative years, little Simona in Napoli, running
Simona
around. I know, running around. Did you have pigtails? What did you? I'm going to paint a picture.
I always wear this sort of handkerchief, my lovely, lovely handkerchief, like that.
Yeah. Running around the piazza.
Always running around, always sort of, talking and meeting, and very energetic. And as I was sort of labeled a little bit crazy, I was always the crazy child. I wasn't really crazy. I now know, with all the, the maturity of my age, that I was just full of life and joy, and I loved people, and I loved talking to everyone. And my grandmother, Mimi, was it makes me emotional thinking about her, because I think she's here, completely here whenever I talk about HubDot. She was a great connector, and my grandmother used to talk to everyone, and I have this sort of image of her as a little girl. I remember her. I had an incredible story. She ended up being one of the very first female entrepreneurs in the south of Italy.
Oh,
I
wow.
come from Napoli, south of Italy, which is obviously was, in after the war, very, very difficult, obviously, as you can imagine. And so she always used to sit and always think, so that person should really be connected with that one. I think she had this literally, the mind of a connector. And I was fascinated by how fundamentally she was doing networking, but very earlier on. And so I think that was a very big inspiration for me.
Yeah.
Looking at my grandmother and how driven and ambitious she was. Of, her life had started in a certain trajectory. There was a trajectory of many, many difficulties and sort of no money and hardship. But how she managed to change that trajectory, and how she decided that she was going to have a different narrative about her. And so I found that very empowering. And then in Napoli, the piazza is everything, right, in Italy, still now.
Yeah.
So it's the place where you connect, where people talk. And obviously, I guess when I came to London 27 years ago, I had this thing. I really sort of analysed what it was that I wanted to start, with HubDot. And I think as a little girl, I always had this thing of wanting to belong. I didn't, and looking at, how I grew up in Naples, I never really felt I belonged to Napoli and to my family. I always felt there was something else. I wanted to find out something new, something different. And so I think the idea of recreating that buzz and that energy of the piazza in London was also about looking for a way of belonging, which to me is very important. And I think for a lot of people is very important, especially now, post-COVID, and there's a lot of loneliness. And I think there's this sense of people wanting to get a sense of self that I do think you get from being with other people, that being connected. And so in a way, I think I left Italy behind when I came over, but I wanted to recreate a place where I could feel that no matter how crazy and how different, and I could just be myself and make incredible connections, but bring the magic of those years, I think, where it was just fun. Napoli is a very fun place. It's very over the top, is where, people will talk about business. First of all, they start, it's all about relationship, even if you're having a very serious conversation about business. This idea of, becoming friends and getting to know each other. That's very Neapolitan, very Southern.
And I suppose as well, that kind of thing of piazza, when you've got different people from different walks of life, different characters, all kind of congregating in the same place.
The open space.
Absolutely. Because, ordinarily what we're used to is you kind of flock together with what is the common, the common narrative.
Yes.
Oh, we're all in banking, we're all artists, we're all et cetera,
or belong to a club,
so
right?
we find so we find our common kind of ground, whether it's work, friends, you find this thing and then you're like, okay, we connect on this. And usually it's something quite external. It's, I studied this, I work in this. It's all outside of yourself.
Yeah,
and I think
very true.
Whilst you're kind of, painting that picture of that piazza, what I see really has come through to now is anybody is welcome in that piazza and has got something to give that someone that is from something completely different still can take from.
Completely.
And I think that's the uniqueness of HubDot.
And I think that's very much, it goes back, into how in the history, back to the history of the world, the Greek, meeting in an open space, talking about philosophy, and then, the sort of the Romans and the civic life and the market. But this idea that the piazza still now, and it's the same all over the world, right? They call it in different ways, whether it's, wherever in the Middle East, but right? It's the idea of a space where, as you say, there's no barriers, and that where people come, and I always say there isn't a specific agenda. So if you go to a networking event or you belong to a certain club, there is something that is a common denominator. So it brings those people together, and whether it's, women in business or whatever label. And I think for me, HubDot was always meant to be a space, a human space, I would say a leveled human space. So the idea of the dot is to say, everyone, no matter what you have achieved, where you are, just come be, in this space where it is really about everyone's story having the same importance, and everyone's ideas, and everyone can take, as you say, something you walk away with, you offer, you give, but it's this sort of human exchange. And that's what we're very good at doing. I think somehow, I don't know what happened a few years back, that people went into this idea of the networking as a sort of, transactional.
Yeah. And I think that's when networking got a bit of a bad, like almost like you'd go, oh gosh, not networking. Yeah, it was a bit cringe. It was a bit like, oh, not networking.
Do we have to network?
With your, your name badge on, and you go and introduce yourself. It's kind of like, it's actually one of my kind of worst kind of nightmares is to kind of those types of things where you'd be put into a scenario, you'd be at a work do, and you go and you got your label, you pick up your label of your name, and then you'd literally go and say what you do, which department you work in, and then you're just having this really top level, like surface, oh, okay, how's it? And it never goes beneath that. And I feel like HubDot has literally flipped what networking is on its head.
I'm so happy
turned
you say
it upside down.
11 years.
I know, because if someone would have said to me, Because when I went there, I didn't have any preconceived ideas. All I thought was I don't know what this is, but I've been asked to speak, and I was just scared of getting up on stage,
day.
and I was
I mean,
petrified.
do you remember that day? What happened when you went on stage?
And I went on stage, and I kid you not, I only had a minute,
A minute and a half.
a minute and a half. Probably I went a bit over, and I started talking about my story, and
So beautiful.
honestly. And I talked about the transition of, having gone through this awful kind of situation in my life where my personal life was falling apart. Then my work life also started falling apart because I thought I don't really want to do this anymore. And I found myself at this road at the age of kind of 35 going, everything in my life has unraveled. Now, up until that point, I had never spoken about this. And all of a sudden I'm standing up on this little kind of stage, but it's not like a stage and there's the audience far back. It's like everybody's gathered around you. They're close. So you feel the energy. And it honestly, it just came from my heart. And I started kind of going through this. And by the time I'd finished, there was a few tears going on. And I got off and I was like, I cannot believe I've shared in such a, not just authentic, but just like raw. I wasn't ready to share that, but it just came out.
It just came. And I remember that it touched everyone, and it was a mixed audience. Do you remember?
Yeah.
People still remember that day because the way you shared your story, it touched on so many levels of what is the ultimate human story. Because, the human journey of, the sort of failure, the resilience, the dealing with it, deciding and taking action, and where the inspiration, the strength comes from, and then doing it. Like, it was all, you took us on this journey. They was so spontaneous, and it was one of the most beautiful, not because you're here with me, but I tell you every time.
But I also,
no wonder you're doing this.
Well, look where it's led me to, because I think I knew that there was something about connection that I called, when I started my company, Soul Deli. It was kind of me searching in my soul. And that was a very poignant moment for me to stand up, because that connection that I got, I mean, it's almost like why I've started this, has been that knock-on effect of understanding when you get human connection at that very raw, authentic level, there is real magic that happens there, which kind of brings me on to kind of this word alchemy that came out. And there is pure alchemy that happens in HubDot. Talk me through
why alchemy.
Yeah, what is alchemy?
And I remember, so what you said earlier about, I mean, it's beautiful that somehow, there is this shift happening, that the world, whether it was, whatever is happening in the world, whatever those, big events, but somehow I think things are changing and things are moving, and there's a different level, I think, of consciousness that is really beautiful to see and witness. And as you said, more and more people are really embracing this different way, right? The idea that there is a story behind a title, and people talk about storytelling. When I started in 2012, it was very, very earlier on. I remember having one of the first meetings with a bank in London and saying, this event is all about stripping labels and wearing dots and putting storytelling. What's your story? And this guy was very senior, said, you're very Italian, you're very fluffy, you're very... And I remember, because the irony of it is that fast forward now, we got all these companies and banks,
how many
right?
banks have you worked
They're all
with
said, belonging and, diversity and inclusion. I sort of say it with, because there's all these labels of we got to be inclusive and we welcome everyone. And, and I just think it's really sort of fun in a way, because what I was saying at the time was, can we just try?
It was actually ahead of the
Yeah, I think it was. I think
it was almost
a bit.
like when you were talking about it back
too
then.
Early.
Well, you were ahead of the curve, I like to think, but it's almost like we didn't have a language for that, right? So almost like I think you were a pioneer in creating that language.
And so that alchemy is about, so my idea was to, obviously my background is events, right? But my thing, having worked, at Goldman Sachs, organizing sort of big conferences, big events, my thing was always, I used to, organize these beautiful, incredible events, and then always have this, great speakers on stage, and then the audience. So they would be the greatest individuals on earth, and then them. And I always thought, wow, there's no focus on the audience of those coming. They would travel so much, and yet the magic was listening, being very passive.
Yeah.
And so my thing was, why can't an event be an experience where transformations happen? Just like metals turning into gold, a conversation in an environment where I always say shoulders come down, where I'm wearing a dot, I'm talking about my story, and I'm not feeling judged, and I feel I belong, and I'm feeling the best I can be, and I just share an idea. That conversation can lead to something so important, and it's just literally a transformation of something great. And it could be that I'm connected to an idea that I never thought I could find interesting, or a story that I didn't connect with before, and I'm listening to that. So it's this environment of infinite transformations and alchemy. It's magic. It's a moment. It's a split second.
It truly is a moment.
But
And I think you have to go and experience HubDot and actually really feel the full kind of like that capacity of actually being there as an audience member as well. When I've been there, I've never been an audience member or been in an audience where I felt so connected and almost part of what's actually happening.
Thank you for saying that. But don't you think that that's something that we all experience and really need to experience in our life? You know that thing when somebody says, if I hadn't been on that train, if I hadn't spoken to that person, if that person hadn't said, that moment in time, and you think, that was incredible. I want, my vision is for that to be...
Simona want?
Literally, I just want that to be the everyday story of humanity. I want for every human being to, I always say, activate.
I love how grand.
Activate the connected mindset, because we're sitting here and you talk to someone, if you just take a second to really be interested, not thinking, what am I getting out of it, but just to say, meeting someone, just relax and just see what that person has to share, and then say, wow, I may not be able to help you, but maybe I know somebody who can. As back in the village, you saw the town hall. Imagine that. Imagine networking at that level, where it's altruistic.
When it becomes national and global, and now you're going, hey, because I know that you've had people, investors, you've had so many different stories of, for me as well. I mean, I came and shared my story, and I also met a fantastic person who we're co-founding a coffee, very social impact business with.
How lovely.
And it's almost like the magic that happens is that you didn't go there wanting for that.
This is it.
And when you don't go somewhere for a particular thing, then your vision isn't like this, it's like this.
And I love you for saying that, because at the beginning, I remember when I started HubDot, and we went from 100 people to sort of 6,000 and 10,000, sort of big numbers. People used to say in London, I don't really have time. I've got enough friends, and I got my partner, and I got my life, and I got my work, and I got my network. So I don't really need to meet anyone. And, I don't need any more friends. I always used to think that is such a sad mindset. Like, I think our capacity as human beings for connecting and meeting is like love.
Yeah,
it is love. And it's as cringy as it is, I always say it's a community heart-led. That is, you can meet a lot of people, you never know, and you never know what that conversation is going to lead to. And so I think, yes, come, open mind, open heart. This is my vision for everyone in the world, organizations, local governments, schools, and we're now taking HubDot to the next level, which is incredibly exciting. We really want to scale, because we now know after 11 years of doing lots of different cities, going from Antigua, Latvia, Milan, via Dubai, Napoli, and Washington, D.C., that it is a language that people want to speak, and they love it, and they get so much value out of it. So we then went into organizations and local governments and schools and universities. So I'm now ready, really, truly. And 11 is the big number 11.
Lucky number
right?
11, yeah.
This is the 11th year. And I think that we are ready to, we've tested a formula and approach. We've got all these stories of connection, of great value. We're doing work for organizations, and now let's scale it at a level where digitally and physically we can help individuals connect in a meaningful way, and then lives can be more fulfilled, and we can be happier, less isolated. And because isolation and loneliness is is the pandemic now, isn't it? People
yeah.
feeling very
And
cut off.
I think the proof of the pudding is, how can you take a concept which was, I mean, just to take you back, kind of came from your kitchen table.
Yeah, totally.
And then as it grows, is you can take it to any country, nationality, background, and it still speaks. Gender,
background, religion,
and it still speaks. That is something very, very unique. And I think that also lends into the fact of it speaks to people on a human level.
But because that's what it is. And I always, that's why I've been sort of, as you know me really well. I've been always in denial, a part of me in denial of that. I'm the founder of HubDot. I think, I'm not Steve Jobs. But actually, why did I not feel that I came out with something really clever, a product? Because fundamentally, I think I channeled something, right? It was something very much belonged to the way I always lived my life and how, my grandmother was, my family. And so I think that HubDot goes to a place that is very human. So it's almost something that people go, when you experience it, you go, this feels great. This is how I want to meet my investor. This is how I want to talk about my business. Because it just feels like as warm as the kitchen table. It feels cozy. It feels that you don't have to go in a board meeting. When I go and see corporates now and we plan, programs, I always say, I always go, can we have the vibe of a kitchen table?
I love that. Because
it's important. It's all about how we feel.
So take me back to that kitchen table, right? 11 years.
24th of June, 2012, in Fulham, that I used to call Fulham, in Fulham. So in Fulham, I'd gone from working in the city in London, running events, loving it, to raising a family, being very, I would say, very lucky, very privileged to take a career break. So I didn't have to sort of, pay my bills, and I was very lucky. I never never forget that, because not everyone is in a position of doing that, but I was. And so I could dedicate myself to singing jazz. So I did that for a few years, still do it. Whenever I can, I sing.
Beautiful jazz
singer. I go and do
singer.
gigs, so I put my the other hat on, and I love doing that. It's very much for my soul. And so 24th of June, 2012, I had these different worlds that were literally not colliding. And I had my music friends, my creatives, the very grungy, cool people, whatever, in Streatham, whatever, Camden, West End. And then I had my wonderful world of Fulham, pushing prams, and it was all lovely.
Singing
and
jazz.
Beautiful and very sort of middle class and privileged and okay. And then the world of the city, of all this sort of, at the time, lots of friends who had a very high opinion and very strong identity of the sort of the corporate lawyers, the CEOs, this and that, the ones who had achieved the greatest things. And so there was this point where I thought, wow, wouldn't it be incredible if I could help these three different, almost contrasting worlds to meet? And it happened when I remember, somebody said, I'm a musician and all I need is whatever, a few £1,000. That will make a big difference for me. And I thought, wow, you need to meet, in my head, connected mind. I thought, wow, you need to meet that friend of mine who lives whatever in Chelsea. Oh, I got you this, your bloody friend. And they used to call them white bitches. Can I say that?
You can say what you want.
Sorry, it's awful. But I say this story at our events all the time. Terrible, but that's what they used to, and I say, why do you judge? That's a really strong judgment, right?
Yeah.
And so that thing of me saying, wow, what if I can create a space where the person that you think is that and doesn't care about anything and and she's mega rich, hasn't got time, actually is in a space where she can talk to you about your music. And actually you get, and then you know what, a few £1,000 for that bitch is nothing, is peanuts, and it would make in your life the biggest difference. So that was the thinking, right?
Yeah.
So all I did,
and almost like, so what you could see, you connecting the dots, you could see the dots, right?
Yes.
But when you're in it, you're going, that person would never even I would never even speak to that person.
Right, how they look and what they wear and
I'm
the
a musician
accent
and I'm like a struggling musician, and this person pushes around her like £3,000 pram.
Exactly.
What does she know about my life?
Right.
But you could see the human element of the two people going,
because I'm from Napoli.
Exactly. If I could get those two people alchemy could happen, right?
This is it. That was the thing. And it's so simple. And so a friend of mine always said, if
It's quite brave, though, as well.
No, but it was...
It's quite brazen.
It was so
because-
unplanned. So
But you
unplanned. I
are.
just sent an email to
It's
the
quite-
whole of my address book. I had about 450, something like crazy emails.
Yeah.
And the email went, if you, like me, hate networking, you feel really uncomfortable, come, it's a coffee morning in my house, just come. Come whenever it's an open house. And I thought maybe 20 would come, and we had 98, the famous 98. So we had to go to Starbucks to get all the cups. We don't have enough mugs for coffee. I said, because I said in my email, I mean, it's a crazy story. One day we'll make a film out of it, or a book. I remember saying goodbyes with Joe, went to work and with the kids. And Joe said, oh, how many are you having? I said, I don't know, maybe 20, whatever. And then, because in the email, can you believe I still got the email? I said, feel free to bring a friend, as long as you bring maybe a cake or something, like it's an open house. So people came with their stories.
98 people turned up
98.
in your house with cake.
Amazing. With everything. Somebody was starting a fashion brand. They came with a sample, some with the fabric. I mean, little
You
card with
literally
the
had, some
charity,
kind
like
of,
a piazza.
buzzing marketplace going on of different.
But we had no format. So I only ordered the little dots on Amazon, little stickers on the door. So the thinking behind it.
No, but
I know.
how did you, in terms of that moment where you felt this thing in your soul, right? Feel it in your soul, right? You were like, right, I know that Amanda over here,
yes,
and Louise over here,
Yeah.
or Jim over here,
Yeah.
could really help each other, but they don't know that
they
could
will
help
never
it,
meet.
right? They will
so
never
my thing
meet.
was they move
And
in
you
different
felt
circles,
compelled
and I just
that
thought,
I have to put this together.
I've got to be the connector. I just got to be the person
You're the
that.
connector.
But we all are. The thing is that
Not the
we all are in
Terminator,
this
you're the
room.
connector.
You're the connector. You're the. We all are. It's just going to that mindset, and I just thought those people will never meet because they speak differently. They live in different parts of London because and one is sort of broke and the other one. And I just thought, really, this whole concept of, one person helps another one is always an exchange.
Yeah,
it's always
it's
an
an
exchange. So
it's not that I'm in a privileged position, so I'm helping you. It's
I
actually an
help
exchange.
you. I can help
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Because by making that record possible, which is a true story, that individual felt so worthy.
Yeah.
And she didn't, for her few £1,000s made her feeling that she'd made a difference in someone else's life. I feel emotional
gosh.
talking about it. This is one of the millions of stories. And so it is something that I'm not going to stop. I had different phases.
Absolutely. You've just literally
Different-
So first of all,
It's like
where did
lifting.
this dot? How did you come up with
So
the
that
dot?
day,
Yeah.
in fact, the week before, I thought I need to think of a mechanism where the friend of mine who is super established, who is the sort of, serial entrepreneur, and she always said, this, da, da, da. I thought I got her to relax and just talk about something that is unexpected.
Yeah.
And I knew that all she wanted to talk about was music and learning an instrument.
This is when you had your
The coffee
98
morning.
people turn
Exactly.
up.
I just thought I need to strip everything back. So my thing was, what can I give them when they arrive? Is it a question? Is it a card? And I just thought, what if they could just wear a little color that is not the name, surname, what I do, but it's just the mindset, because the mindset is the mindset. So it's what brings us together. So I went on Amazon and we still got the photo. The first one, it was tiny, tiny dots. That obviously now is a trademark and we protect, everything. I mean, 11 years on. But I just ordered the dots. And as they came through the door, I said, hi, welcome. I don't want to know where you work, what you do. I just want you to pick a mindset. Are you here? What is your intention? And that's the same thing. So they picked one and it was a little sticker. And what happened that day was that everyone was connecting.
I'm here
the intention, because I have an idea, yellow, can you help me? So the yellow is, I have an idea, can you help me? Yellow dot. I'm here because I have knowledge or skills to share, and is red.
Yeah.
I'm here because I want to be inspired, and is green. Yeah. Not a passive one, but if you're not really want to come forward, you just wear green, here to be inspired. Yeah. I'm here to make a specific connection, is blue. Or purple, I'm here to tell you my story, a project that I want to talk about. And so that was the dots, that's it. So people came, and I remember clearly that moment. The first reaction was, wow, how different. This is really refreshing. So we had the first meeting. And then after the first meeting, for the sort of 2 weeks after that, the inbox, I still have the first computer with all the emails, because London being so international. And somebody say, my sister of a friend of a friend of a friend, I live in Dubai, I'm in Milan, I'm in Paris. Like an email, when is your next one? When is your next
like,
what?
What?
And I was there singing jazz. My kids were youngest, was like literally 2 years old. I said, next, what is this? But what is this? Oh my God. And people said the same thing in the email, which is now 11 years on. It's exactly what people say. And it said, how liberating. I have a story to look at me, it makes me emotional. Oh my God, I'm so Italian still. I feel everything sort of makes me sort of brings tears. I don't need that label. I can let go of that label.
It's so powerful, Simona.
It's liberating.
It's like you unleashed something that you didn't even know that you unleashed.
It's so nice. And I just want the world to embrace it, right? I mean, I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
And now there is, everyone's coming forward. Now finally we got a team of people and we're literally ready to take it, which is quite, I still think that it's, in its essence, very human, and it hasn't really changed from day one.
But even though it's been, so there's the kind of the HubDot of obviously coming to almost like your piazza, and it could be anybody that's there. But this has even grown into the corporate world. So you've been approached by banks, by big brands. Tell me how.
We're doing something for Amazon.
Yeah.
Lots of incredible brands. And I'll tell you what is really exciting about this is that, which is I'm really also happy to share, because there'd be a lot of, people, entrepreneurs starting with ideas and not really knowing, how am I going to make money? How am I going to support this? What is the business model? And I think that for us was an incredible learning curve, as it always is for everyone. So for a very long time, I did not want to have any commercial layer. I didn't want to have a membership. I didn't want to have the big sponsor. I didn't want to have, sort of somebody, offering things and then, giving some gadget, because I wanted to keep it very pure. And that came at a big cost. It was really hard to sustain it. I was obviously very lucky and privileged to be able to keep on going. Lucky to have found incredible people, volunteers all over the world who said, we believe in this. This is something to make the world a better place. So we are on board. So we have this sort of, international franchise of volunteers. Incredible at the beginning, women mainly who helped me. But the way in which we discovered we could sustain our work for the community, which is obviously not for profit and is really to make is accessible to all, was to do this for organizations. And so in a sort of, post-pandemic world and post sort of Black Lives Matter world, business world that needs to truly believe in being inclusive as a mindset. It's not just about
not just a performative
label.
Or a kind of a tick box, right? which I think that large organizations, having worked in one and even had clients, that you can see the intention is there, but how to put that into real time is always actually a struggle on an organizational level. So tell me how HubDot has, give me an example, or tell me how HubDot does that in an organization.
So what HubDot is fundamentally an engagement mechanism. So it's a format and a way of bringing people together. So bringing your people together to your strategy, together as in teams, together around a topic or a priority. So obviously we do events, DEI, diversity and inclusion, is a very big one. Wherever there is a need, well-being, mental health, reverse mentoring, wherever there is a need of, getting your teams to work better within themselves, we organize programs and we address topics that traditionally would have been presented in a very, how should I describe it, in a sort of, workshop style with, being told and you hear, and that's how I need to behave, and that's what I've done
wrong. It's very passive, isn't it?
Right? In just fundamentally bring everyone into a space that is human, that is leveled, where we want everyone to shift mindset and really understand. I would say it's not about what I do to be inclusive, it's how I am. It's all here.
Yeah.
It's how do I need to be to truly be inclusive and to truly be anti-racist, right? To really be an ally, effective ally. And I think that there is something in what we do. Obviously, we have an incredible collective of individuals and, groups that work with us, which is super exciting about the growth.
Yeah.
Because we do events, we've done a big conference recently for a bank on, LGBTQIA plus, community, attraction and retention of talent. So there's lots of different things that we're involved in, but it's always working with individuals and it's always through lived experience. Because I am,
And
a
I
white,
think,
cisgender, woman, right? So I'm no one to tell you talk about gender, and I can't.
yeah.
Or racism. Who am I, right?
Yeah.
But what I can do and what I know how to do really well is to break down barriers and help people listen to each other and be in a space where there is understanding. So
Yeah.
that is the formula. And obviously we invite incredible experts out there who do incredible work to work with us. And so we deliver programs. So yeah.
And I think the the difference and the kind of the element that makes it so special is when you create something that is a presentation, right? You are sitting there and, you'll be in a conference at work and you're being told, this is now our stand. This is what we stand for. These are our values, right? And it's almost like it's hitting the windscreen and literally falling off, right? So how many people that's getting through to, you have no idea. But when you create something immersive, when you are in it, when those questions come up that make you feel uncomfortable and the conversation is happening there, then real time, then you come away with it going, hey, inclusion means something. It's not, hey, we're inclusive. It means something to me.
Completely.
And
the
I
shift,
think, yeah.
The shift of mindset and the shift of, wow. So what and also, we want to sort of understand. I mean, it's been, by the way, an incredible learning curve for me because, HubDot was, and I think, one should never cancel, right? The sort of the first chapters of the story.
Absolutely.
HubDot started, I live in Fulham, so very, where I live, Parsons Green, and, my King's Road was the first event. It was, very white, and it was, definitely, the majority of, of people who came to the first one were sort of, very much women, cisgender, I would say.
Yeah.
So it started a certain way, and there was, even for me, like so I always thought it's open to everyone can come. But then it's been an incredible journey for me to understand that, am I doing the best I can do as a founder of this community to make sure that everyone truly feels welcome and truly, is there belonging. And I started, sort of in the last sort of, literally 3 years, I started listening to a lot of people and I learned that there was a lot more that I had to do.
Yeah.
And you know what? I started being so vocal about white supremacy. And the minute that I started being vocal about it, I'd say, if we can talk about racism, anti-racism, if we don't admit that we live in white supremacy still. And I had a lot of people saying, you are alienating us.
Wow.
The ones who came at the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah, this is part
How
of the
did
story
you,
that you don't know.
No, how did you
And
deal
I
with
just said,
that?
I am alienating you. Wow, that is fascinating. Why? Because this space was not, and so that's when a lot of things, and what I'm saying, the growth also for me of understanding. And
But
I
just to kind of,
that's a big one, isn't it?
That's a big one.
I know.
I don't want to just move on to that.
I know,
because
huge.
That's really interesting for me
Or
as
gender,
well, right?
it's another big one, yeah.
Because there are, being someone from, of color, Indian heritage, I don't feel I can talk about things quite freely, right? So how does that feel for you when you're saying, now I, as a white woman living this privileged life,
Yeah.
and using this language, which is very provocative and, brings up a lot, right?
Yes.
How did you
We
go?
got to bring it all up because we got to really talk about this.
Yeah.
It's really important. And I thought, and I thought that it was always inclusive and open and welcoming and everyone would come, but really it wasn't really. And I had to go, deep down, very deep down.
And how did you feel about
it was
using
it was
that
very hard. I had a lot
language?
of people so attacking me from many labels, saying you only care about Black women, you don't care about Asian women as much as you can. I mean, really fast. When you put
Wow.
yourself out there and you start being vocal. So I guess I've entered that space big time, because I think if you have, with the privilege comes
Yeah.
a massive responsibility.
Yeah.
So I have this great community, 35,000 people, and I'm all over the world, and we do events, we go into corporates. If I've got that and I really care about belonging, then I need to really be vocal. And I need to say, so how do we feel about this? I need to talk about things like white supremacy, because we've got to talk about that. I know it's a massive elephant in the room, but it's got to be addressed.
And do you take that conversation within a corporate environment?
Of course we do. Of course we
Wow.
do.
And I think
we take it with people
Yeah.
that are, experts, they do specific work, but, not as I'm sharing with you now,
Yeah.
because I'm telling you the ones that felt alienated and felt that HubDot was not the thing that I'd started and it was not meant for those people anymore. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I thought, maybe I haven't really expressed my vision very well. So I haven't really, sort of stepped into my power.
Wow.
And I need to be vocal, and I need to really say things, and I need to make sure that everyone has a voice. And if I notice things or email anything, little thing, I need to stop, pause, and say, sorry, what you've just said is not correct. So you just misgender that individual. Like I need to do it. I need to do.
So
I can't sit here
so
doing a
that was-
podcast because I'm a superwoman. Really? No, I've got the responsibility of doing that. If I'm the founder of a
Wow.
global community.
So that
Don't you
sounds
think,
like
Angelee?
I do.
It's
And
hard
I also
work.
think you're like, it takes a lot of courage and being brave and actually not
And
knowing
learning. I'm
and
learning every day. I'm learning from amazing people.
But I think everyone is.
every day.
Everyone's in a learning stage of how do we use language? What is the right way to kind of, to express certain things? Is there a right way or is there a wrong way? Or is it okay to say, hey, I said that wrong, and bringing it up? Because I think the worst thing we can get to is to think, hey, you can't say that. You can't, like, if it feels like it offends, then we need to unpick it and then understand, okay, why did it hurt? Because then I understand where that hurt came from. And rather than going, I'd rather not look at that, I'm just going to move on and just smile and say, hey, I'm really inclusive. But actually what I'm scared to do, let's say as a white woman, living in maybe a privileged area like Fulham, is I'm scared to say things because I don't know whether how this is perceived. And I, as an Indian woman, of Indian heritage from Luton, might be thinking, hey, I actually found that a little bit offensive. Let me tell you why I found that offensive.
But we've
but
got
you
to
need
have
to
that
have the conversation.
Otherwise, we're never ever going to change anything.
I think that's so
We
powerful.
really need
That
to
is
talk
like
about
I feel like you'll feel it in your soul.
Forget about
moment.
everything else. Like,
where you were like, I know that this is tough, but I have to do this.
Oh my goodness. And it was when somebody said, it all happened when, obviously, with the death of George Floyd, it was an incredible, moment where a lot of people and friends of mine, came forward, Black, friends, and started saying, wow, let's really talk about, where I stand with this, what I'm, and it was an incredible moment. And so it came when a particular individual said, I always felt that you were welcoming at HubDot, like you really valued me, but I not everyone else did. And I felt, because that day you told me after an event, I could come and join you all for the sort of the dinner, the post drinks. And I saw a few people just standing there and say, you're not coming because you're not welcoming that group. And after that conversation, I thought, I hadn't seen it. So I need to see it. I had to see it, do you know?
Yeah. And you have to do something. You felt like you had to do.
That's it.
Had to bring that conversation.
And I felt awful. I felt, wow. And just for the fact that I didn't pick up on that, I had no idea that you felt uncomfortable. And I thought, this is not what HubDot stands for. And so that was the beginning of, wow, what is this community about? What do I stand for? What is the value? Like literally, what is it about? And HubDot was traditionally women. We thought that it was whole thing about women and feminine energy. It started like that because the kitchen table, I said, coming from, Goldman Sachs in the city, I didn't want to project my toxic ego and be, I'm a super, I thought that was very much what I thought at the time, very, man in the traditional sense. But HubDot has evolved into being a community for everyone. and we have, non-binary individuals. And I learned so much. I had, someone, from the trans community, queer community working with me. And I learned so much that when you start looking at the world in a different way, and you really understand so much more.
Yeah.
And I had to learn all of that because I grew up in the south of Italy. It was all, a girl would meet a guy, get married, and, Catholic upbringing.
Yeah.
But a lot of things have shifted. And I always say it's the community that has taught me. I'm learning every day from the community. So I haven't got any sort of special agenda, but it's becoming this, I'm just going to all these different directions. I can see that a little simple format can create impact and change things.
You've got your first, is it Gen
Z.
Gen Z,
Yes.
yeah, Gen Z.
We hosted it.
You've
a couple
hosted
of weeks
it.
ago.
Which
is
just
a beautiful
shows
story.
how, when you said like, okay, it started off as this, and I think this is
Yeah.
a really important thing for wherever you are in your journey, whether you're an entrepreneur, whatever it is that
Yes.
you're doing, that everything has an evolution. Never think what you start with, and you have this, like we do projections, and this is what I'm going to finish with. This is the finished article, because there has to be an evolution where you are looking at what you've done, and then that feeds where you want to go next. And you had this real awakening, this soulful moment where you felt it in your soul going, hey, this is not a women get round a table going, it was too surface for you. You were like, okay, we've got an interest. We've got people sitting around a table,
Yes.
but how are we going to now elevate that into some real conversations
Completely.
that can
And then the
actually
ones-
change mindset?
Absolutely. And the ones that don't want to follow that, the ones that sort of, they've dropped out, they go. And it's
Yeah.
okay. It's absolutely fine. And I think, one should never be also shameful of what the story, your story, because maybe the first chapter, second or third was very different from who we are today. And that was very much, this was a starting point. But from that tiny dot, from that tiny kitchen table, the majority white women, I mean, we had one of Indian heritage who was, an incredible influence in the group. But from that group, it sort of really started, and it's evolved in what it is today with, as you say, I think there's this, as you call it, the soul moment, where we just really know, we know the soul of this community. We know where it sits. And it speaks so loudly that I can't
ignore it.
And I can't
You
silence
can't
it anymore. And I just, with this sort of, I think with me getting old and having, a lot of wrinkles.
Absolutely
older.
not.
And
You're
sort of,
getting
still,
wiser.
11
Simona,
years on,
wiser.
older, wiser. I sort of feel that I really don't care anymore about judgment. I really don't. Because I feel that whoever is meant to be with me is going to come. And okay, I'm not for everyone. Some people, I'm too big, I'm too loud, you're bigger than life, you're a big character, you're very Italian, you're always, it's okay. I'm like that, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's the space I want to take.
But I mean, I've got to thank you for creating that space, because I do think there needs to be more voices that actually say, we're going to talk about this.
Yes.
This is a difficult subject, and we're going to get in there.
And in our families.
And absolutely, in our families. And just
neighbors.
holding it up, and actually not making anybody wrong, but actually going, can we understand each other? And when you said, oh, we've done our first Gen Z, we're so much, I mean, when I think of I started the business 6 years ago, when we done our first pitch, big, fund in the city. And I remember it was all guys sitting on one side, and I sat down and I'd done this presentation, and I didn't know how it all kind of, so I said, okay, so what do you want me to do? How do we start this? And the guy in the middle went, impress us. And I just sat there. And I went, okay. And I had this all linked up with the laptop and on the screen.
Us.
And I closed the screen and I said, well, for a start, a PowerPoint presentation is not going to impress you. And I literally it just really got me so riled up, like impress me. Like I'm like some wind up doll that I'm just going to be put here in the middle to impress you. And what I found so refreshing
and positioning themselves up there, like, you've got to
rather than
impress
feeling
me.
that this was an exchange, that I might have an idea that your company could go, actually there's an exchange there. It was very transactional, and it was like, what are you going to do for us? How are your numbers going to work for us? And what I think and what I felt from HubDot was, when you take that away and you actually just go there and you actually take away all those layers of what we're doing, whatever we're presenting for, and you actually just go and speak, and it's only a minute or two, but that's all you need to get what you need to say across.
And we've had connections of businesses. Like it's not all about holding hands and I really love you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna help
it's
you.
not kumbaya.
Because
it's
people
not
feel
kumbaya.
People thought it was a cult
Yeah,
thing.
it's not.
When I said, what is this cult thing that you run? I said, I don't run any cult.
Yeah.
What do they do at these events? People talk about business. It's just VC, but it's just in the the environment is different. So that VC comes with a mindset. Say they don't even know who it is in the room. It's just a red dot. But if you knew who that person was, you'd be completely like, you're going to perform. No. Yeah. I got an idea and true story.
That's it.
That's it.
So when it's down to, I've got an idea and you might be able to help. Yeah. You just talk about it. There is no, oh my God, it didn't work. Or you just leave it there on the table, and it's either something that's received or it's not. But when you were saying to me that you had to have some of those difficult conversations, I just remember back to that place of how it made me feel. And it was like, you're put on the spotlight and you better shine and like do this presentation. It's like a little tap dance. And it's like, we've moved on. And I think what HubDot is showing us is, my God, as a society, let's move on, because there's another way that we're going to connect.
Totally. But how many people fail at raising money? And I'm not even talking about literally how many, because that whole environment about, come on, also they want you to fail. Like you say, come on. And I always say, some of my kids love Dragon's Den. I always say, that program is just not how the world of business is. I think it's all sort of television. Because it doesn't need to be like that. It really does not need to be like that.
And I do think that has existed, but I feel what is coming through, and especially from the younger generation, right? And I feel what you're doing has been ahead of the curve, but I do feel right now we are, because we had COVID, and it's actually forced everyone to, it's almost like, you'd have a work a Zoom call, and, you'd pick your baby up, or the dog would be barking, or Amazon would come, and everyone would be like, it's cool, right? Before that, we lived in a world where like, it wasn't cool. You couldn't like show that you were a normal human being. Facade, you had to walk in with this.
And that's why Gen Z, that's why we started with Gen Z, because obviously we got so much to learn from the younger generation. I love them so much. I love how they think, how they live their life. I know that it's, a lot of people say, because they're very sort of selfish and self-centered. I think there's a lot that we can learn from this different way. Yeah. Because to be honest, we made, my generation a big mess of the world. And so they're looking at things very differently. And so they all about connecting with each other, experiencing lives. And it's not about acquiring something, right? Sharing economy is all about we share an experience. I don't need to own a car, own a house because I've done really well. It's about, I'm a nomad. I live there and I live there. But being together and I think it's a beautiful philosophy. So I love that about Gen Z.
And I do think this mindset that I can learn something from an 18-year-old, or I can learn something from a person who lives in a completely different country. That thing of breaking back, that is the biggest way that we can break barriers, is to actually go, like, I actually can learn something of you, rather than me thinking, what am I going to learn of you?
So this is the thing. And that's why we're also very excited about HubDot, to address lack of social cohesion. So we do work with local governments and cities and, boroughs in London, where there's this whole thing. You got, the rich, wealthy streets, and then you got, the other side, or in states. But people need to be together in the park. The park is a place where everyone belongs, where everyone has the right to have a picnic. And you can have this sort of Italian or French family not liking, the sort of Jamaican, loud music, the family having a picnic. There's so much inequality that I now experience every day. And I think there's been a massive sort of awakening, even for me, of saying, this is just not right. And we can all do something to change that and say, let's actually, as you say, let's be really humble. Do you know what? Just for the fact that you've made a few millions, you don't think you can learn from someone else, really? Or because you're like 60, you can learn from any other human being, because your life is evolving. And at that point, you need to have that connection, right? With that person. Connections are fluid, just like life is in the story, the human story. It's not set in stones.
It's so magical, Simona. And I do think
you're a magical host.
What's next for HubDot?
What's next? So what's next is scaling growth, is just literally going from this point into creating a space that is sort of digital and physical, where more we can really, take HubDot to more and more people. So one level is that. So definitely, and make sure that HubDot is in your life when you need it, right? It's very important. You can access that community.
So I might be at
the knowledge,
home,
the skills. And
I'm like, do you know what? I want to start a business. And you're like, let me just connect with HubDot and see if there's something there. Or
this is
I
want to be inspired. I'm feeling very stuck, and I need to do, a course, a coaching course, whatever. I need to understand where I'm gonna go next. And so HubDot has created over the years this beautiful community of individuals that have very different skills, and all we have to do is just connect them to each other.
Sounds amazing.
This is next, really.
And so thank you so much, Simona.
Thank you for having me.
It's been, honestly, I could speak to you.
I'm always
all
paranoid
evening.
that I'm not speaking well enough.
No.
I sound too Italian.
No, you sound amazing. I've got
go off on a tangent.
Tangents are good, right? So you kind of do this and then you kind of weave in and out, because like I said, that there is an evolution to every single thing.
And we're just having a real conversation anyway, so it's not right.
Exactly. So as a closing tradition, you know how much I love Stephen Bartlett, and he's
I love him.
He's
I
the
went to his
person
rave.
I know. So he's the person that got me kind of thinking, I really want to do a podcast, because I was listening to his. So he does a closing tradition. So I thought, I'm going to start my own closing tradition.
He gets somebody to ask a question or whatever he does.
Mine's going to be a little bit different, just because I don't want to completely plagiarize him, which is, I think, giving the gift of hindsight and experience to our listeners. What advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. I've got that ready.
Ooh.
I didn't know.
Seriously?
I didn't know you were going to ask me that.
Because I haven't told anyone.
But I got it ready because I've been very recently, because obviously I have 2 daughters and a son.
Yeah.
And I always, always sort of tell them, because I was thinking, I'm telling you because if I said that to myself, to my younger self. So I got it ready because it was a very recent conversation at home. I would say to my younger self, don't dim that light. My God. Don't dim the light.
I love that.
This thing of, when you feel I want to do, and I want to be, and I want to dance, and I want to sing, and I want to write. Just don't think that you gotta occupy a smaller space to make other people feel more comfortable. Don't dim it.
Oh my God. Don't dim your light. I mean, that is
always, I've got to contain. I've got
to contain this persona of Simona. It's too big for corporate.
And I even did, because obviously I was always sort of super, but I would say just don't to feel that you are helping other people by dimming your light, because I think you're doing the opposite. There's a beautiful quote about, giving others if you really enter that space, you give other people permission to shine. And so I think that's a big thing. That's what I would say to myself, because I wasted a lot of years.
Thank you, Simona.
So
thank you for giving me the space to also shine my light. So thank you. It's been a pleasure, as always.
I'm so excited about you and your podcast. You're going to go, don't worry about Steve Bartlett. He's got enough. You're going to go, whoosh. This is so your space. Thank you, darling.
Thank you so much, Simona.
Mwah.